I'm Cindy Adams with Leadership Circle. If you're a part of Leadership Circle, you probably are familiar with my name and face. And today I'm joined by Kay and Eva from Unlocking Eve. And we are thrilled as a trio, a power trio, to be here together with you to share what Unlocking Eve has been up to and what we're up to in Leadership Circle in partnership. You know, it's not by coincidence that we came together because leadership is our passion and conscious, effective leadership in complexity, as all of you know, has never been more critical. And together, Unlocking Eve and Leadership Circle are developing some new ways of thinking, talking, and being in the world of transformation, transformational leadership. And Unlocking Eve, in partnership with Leadership Circle, is creating an integrated leadership model that emphasizes essential capacities for systems leaders needed to navigate in today's challenges. And our partnership is really committed to that and expanding reach and realizing truly big goals and significant impact for meaningful systems change. And that is the unlocking lever, the systems change in ecosystems that we're envisioning together. And Eva and Kay have been extraordinary leaders. They're both founders of Unlocking Eve and both healthcare executives, and that is one of their primary target audiences is healthcare, because healthcare needs it. Um, Not more than other industries, but that's their passion and impact. And healthcare is lagging behind in some of the areas that we need them to not be lagging behind. So they have a goal to increase the number of women in healthcare by 50% in decision-making roles and advancing integrated leadership in healthcare. And they're going to talk a lot more about all of that throughout this session together. Evan, Kay, did I leave anything really critical out that you want to chime in on?
Thank you, Cindy. No, this has been really a great pleasure to be with you today and represent the partnership with Leadership Circle and Unlocking Eve, and seeing all of the faces here on the screen, and just wanting to be able to share with you the work that we have been doing, because we believe that this is something that could really change the way we access our own capacities for effectiveness and leading change. And I know all of you here are leaders in your own rights, and in your own systems and in your own organization. So thank you for joining us today. Eva, anything that you want to add? And
Just happy to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to share screen, and I'm going to talk for a few moments about the research that I did. I think, gosh, I can't remember. It was published, I think, in 2021. And I did that with Lonnie Van Dusen, who most of you know. And in that research, we took from our database at Leadership Circle and culled out those that identified as female and those that identified as male, so that we were clean in our research. And that was about 84,000 people in our database that we looked at. And what was somewhat surprising is the feminine advantage that came out of that study. And we did that and we have a white paper on that and research paper that you can look back to if you want to. But we did that really not knowing exactly what would come out of that. So the core summary research is that on average, female leaders demonstrated higher levels of leadership effectiveness and higher levels of creative competency. What does that mean in our model? That means that overall, female leaders were leading from a creative orientation more, a bit more, and enough more that it was making a significant difference, and that they were leading from less reactive mindset, structure, and tendencies compared to their male counterparts. And at that point, I knew that women had something to teach us right now in this complex, adaptive era that we're in. And we needed to highlight that something was going on that was important about a leadership shift. They also scored higher on competencies fueling relational skills. In fact, caring connection was a supercharged superpower that was fueling a lot of upshift in other areas, even in that move. And so fueling relationship skills and systems perspective. So think about what's needed now: relationship skills, network, matrix, um, connections across ecosystems, caring deeply, radical humanity, and systems impact, systems perspective, knowing what those levers are that are going to create true systems change. These competencies are core to creative leadership in a complex world. So those were interesting findings. And then additionally, that move through to authenticity, to have power with, and to be truly authentic in our achieving and systems perspective, was another drive-through, which created critical creative leadership that integrates courage in action. Without courageous conversation, without standing in the difficult things, without making stands that are kind of even against the current norm, in action, nothing moves forward. And so those pieces in unknown and uncertain complexity end up really mattering. And that got me so excited about what was possible for all of us as we look at leadership. And that's where Kay and Eva, when they founded Unlocking Eve, started to look at how can we drive this in such a way that it's not off-putting and talking about females and talking about males, but how can we create a leadership model that honors what women are doing, and that men also are doing, that is making a significant difference. I think that's it, Kay and Eva. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, wonderful. And thank you so much, Cindy. And I think it's just this, the power of all of this is in the collective research that's coming out. And the curiosity with Unlocking Eve, as Cindy mentioned, was really about not so much codifying just the advantage, but we were very curious because we are practicing leaders in healthcare, in large organizations. How do you translate this research into practice? And a lot of DEI efforts have known for many, many years that if you increase diversity within leadership teams, performance goes up, profitability goes up, creativity goes up, innovation goes up. And boy, does the world need increased innovation and creativity. It wasn't just women, obviously all diversity increased in leadership teams and organizations. But the question, we were struck with was, what is it about these leaders, women and other diverse leaders, that they're bringing to the table course, that question sat with us for many, many years, but with the support of intent and inspired by data that was just presented and many other data we've seen of how female leaders have this advantage, we had the biggest world experiment during the pandemic. And during the pandemic, you know, lucky that we had been thinking about this question for years, because then during the pandemic, what struck Kay and I while we were, as all of you probably, stuck at home with a lot more time on our hands than usually, you know, seeing the data coming through that women at the helm of countries, all the way from huge countries like Germany to smaller islands like New Zealand, in the early stages of the pandemic, had 6 times less deaths due to COVID-19 than countries not led by those women. And that, you know, in addition to all the other research, stopped us in our tracks and then really made us curious about the research and really set us forth. That's how Unlocking Eve was born, to explore whether these differences could be codified into an integrated, holistic model and way of and capacities that we can teach and we can cultivate in everyone, men or women. Because wouldn't the world be a better place if leaders across all of healthcare countries could save more lives? So that, I think, in its essence, was really what sprung us into action, was the real life experience of this unfolding, and we happened to catch it at the right time, and we were really motivated to translate it into something meaningful and useful. So, Kay, over to you for the next one.
And this is really what we stand for as Unlocking Eve, in terms of our purpose, is to unlock integrated leadership in all for a balanced and healthier world. I think one of the things that we've noticed, and Ava, you mentioned this around the diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives that we all have. I think this is something that we now feel and sense that is really creating a bigger divide, and there's greenwashing of some of these efforts. And Unlocking Eve really is standing for equity, where this integrated leadership is something that we want, not just for women, but for all people, to really unlock their own innate capacities. Because this is, as leaders and as we raise our consciousness about who we are and our identities, part of that is understanding of these innate capacities that we have. We're going to talk about what those are, but we've known about it traditionally as masculine and feminine. We've, you know, from the historical and ancient times of yin and yang. This is really a kind of tapping into these energy sources and capacities that are building our research and understanding of what it will take for all of us to be more effective in our own leadership journey. And what we have as an aim is to reach 100 million leaders. And you might say that this is an audacious big goal. But at the same time, if we look at the overall population of the world, this is what we believe is needed to really make that shift in our thinking and in our collective understanding of what leadership capacities are needed to solve all of the issues that we have, and what you are passionate about, whether that's equity, whether that's economic progression for all, or eliminating poverty. I think this is something that is clear, that we want to ensure that everyone understands that what we need is already innate in all of us. So that's where the word unlock comes from, because we believe that this is already existing in all of us. So a lot of our tools and our programming is to enable that unlock of those capacities.
And look, leadership for as we're speaking to the choir here, because and as you go through this, we have a little bit of content beginning. As we go through this, I'd love for you to have your editor on, you know, your background conversations, you know, jotting down, I agree, I don't agree, this is my experience, it's not my experience, what I would add to this, what I would take away from this, because this community that we're presenting to, you know, your leaders, you're right, but you're also thinking about this day in and day out, and so feel free as you go through this, not take it as the truth, but as our truth at the moment, and be adding to it as you see fit. And we love for you, whatever insights you generate or whatever thinking, agree, disagree, yes, no, I experience this, I don't experience this, this resonates, this doesn't. Please, we will give you our contact, and you can share with us your thoughts so that collectively we can make this body of work improve over the next years and months. Because the evolution of leadership, right? Leadership is a construct. It's a construct we all have created to make sense of the human condition and human condition in context. And, from 1900s, the evolution of leadership, the great man. I mean, isn't that so ironic to where we are here today, unlocking Eve? But the great man. And then we had traits-based leadership in the 30s, right? People trying to codify this into what are the traits that are driving good leaders. Then we had the inviting of the behavioral leadership. It's both traits and behaviors, but then people are saying, well, it's not just traits. We got to start looking at how these people behave. What's the observable result of that trait? Because that's something you can actually then, judge in a sense, because it's observable. And then we had, well, actually it's situational. How people behave will depend on the context they're in. And here entered situational leadership in the 60s. And then there was, in the 80s, we started to introduce transformational leadership, which was, look, it's traits manifesting in behaviors depending on your context so that you can transform your outcomes. So we're starting to get much more into the so what of the behavior, which is transforming, moving something from A to B, basically, changing. Leadership is an act of change in a system or in a situation. And then authentic leadership took hold in the 2000s, which was really about that advent. And now we're building on all of that, and we're saying, hey, actually, it's integration, isn't it? Our truth at the moment is about this. It's not about male or female. It's not even about one behavior or another. It's about being able to do both in situ, in service of extraordinary breakthrough outcomes, while we're dealing of integrating this extremely complex context and outer world. We're integrating that into our inner world. We're growing our inner world to respond to that outer world, and then hopefully getting better outcomes. So I'm sure in 20 years from now, something else will emerge, and it will be great and good, but this is our truth at the moment. And again, very, very curious to hear your thoughts. So on the next slide, we did some research, and this is like the call to why Kay and I have such an urgency around this by 2030. Our leaders are falling short. We know that. The scale and the intensity, and we heard that, of challenges that we're exposed to, our leadership is failing the moment. 72% of people surveyed say that traditional leaders and their ways of leading are preceding the poly crisis we're experiencing, so contribute to what is happening. If you think about our current political context, our current economic context, and our current social welfare, and just the amount of wars around the world, there definitely is something out of balance. And over 50% say if we continue as we are, whether you're looking climate, finance, crime in my area, government leadership, things are going to get worse. But it's not just leaders are falling short. We're failing leaders too, because we are coaching and developing, maybe the outdated norms and behaviors. And so our expectations need to shift. And just a story to anchor this. Do you remember when it was perfectly fine to smoke on airplanes? Like some of you might have actually been, smoking on airplanes. It was like the norm. That is no longer acceptable. And because it's making people sick. And it's making society sick, being stuck in this airplane with all this smoke. So this is the level of seriousness, and commitment we have that, by 2030 it should no longer be acceptable for the standard of leadership to really shift to the moment that is meeting us at the moment. So on the next slide is just I think landing this point of leadership shift that we're collectively, with many others, trying to move forward. You all know this, but hope does remain in business leaders. And that's where we come from. 75% people agree that Large companies with resources and infrastructure and advanced logistics are more vital now than ever, and that they are really, we're relying on leaders in business to really help move the dial on many of the issues. And so that's the area we come from. That's the area we want to continue to influence. And if you move to the next slide now, with this context, I think will give you a sense of kind of the model itself. But before we do that, let's just go back to Cindy to give us a little bit more on the data and insight on which some of this is built on.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. So in our research, we look at, of course, achieving and relating as a balance score. And the balance score is looking at how we lead with people and task together or not. And the most effective leaders always, research in this area is very comprehensive, always have relating and achieving together as a perspective, as a mindset, as a way of being. And you can see here that if we're low in that, we will be less effective. And what happens at higher levels in our model, in the creative competencies, where we begin to leverage both achieving and relating. If I start achieving more, like the upshift from controlling to achieving, then the likelihood that I'm going to start looking at relating is a 0.80. So the correlation is higher once I move up to creative. That doesn't always happen, but there's a good correlation that once I can upshift and get perspective, regardless of relating or achieving, I'm going to then see a need for both. When that magic happens and I score high in relating and achieving, then the effectiveness really increases, as does the effect across the entire model, which Eva and Kay would agree is more integrated capacities when we're haloing across the model in leading that way. Anything else I need to hit there, Eva?
Maybe building on Cindy's point about the capacities or competencies around achieving and relating. This really brought our attention to what is it that is innate in all of us, moving more than just the competencies that we have, but actually looking at the capacities. And you could see here on the right, and what are the framework that Unlocking Eve is about, is really bringing this autonomous and relational capacities that we have. And we've identified these 8 capacities around this fluidity between autonomous and communal. But at the same time, we want to be able to give access to this to everyone in a way that is fully understood and simple to understand, in a way that you can access and tap that into those capacities. Just going through the autonomous and relational, the infinity sign is intentional because we believe that the leadership is a dynamic and ever evolving process, that there is a fluidity in nature when we access these capacities within us. And whether that's in situ or in context of where we are as leaders or as individuals, this is where our awareness of these capacities can really lend to more effective outcomes. This is, one of the examples that we've really used here is, when you exercise and when you're only working on your left arm. This is an example of you're just utilizing some of the autonomous or relational preferences that you have, but actually to be more effective and to actually gain even more strength, you need to be able to access both. And this is where, with Unlocking Eve and our integrated leadership model, the offering is for every individual and every leader to be able to have that capacity to access. So I'll pause here and maybe ask a question to our listeners in terms of what resonates to you, or what curiosity do you have about this autonomous and relational approach that we are sharing with you today.
Go ahead and raise your hand or just speak out. It would be great to hear from a few of you. David, you're on mute.
Hi, thanks. So the question that's popped into my mind, you talked about leadership being situational, and I understand what that means. But in that context, what are some of the principles that are not situational?
Yeah, I mean, principles, I love that. I love that term. I mean, I can start, but please, and anybody else chime in, because you lead with leaders all the time. I think what consistent is your values, isn't it? It's I think that's the consistent thing. Integrity, yeah, I mean, integrity, the value of community, the value of being of service. I mean, I think those things, you know, cut across all contexts. Fairness, honesty. You know, I think, you know, and integrity would probably, I'd wrap it up in integrity as the main word. You know, to have integrity across context. Just because you behave in a different way across context, it should never be out of integrity with your values. So I would say those are consistent. And it's interesting that you asked this, David, because what we're trying to do with the model is we're trying to get people to actually show up show up as integrated across contexts. I think what we're trying to do is to say, look, yes, it's situational. Yes, in one sense, you're going to need to lean more into your agency and your directiveness. Another one, you're going to need to show up more with empathy and compassion. But they shouldn't be so black and white. How do you show up with compassionate accountability? How do you show up with integrated thinking, with radical generosity, not at the expense of yourself? Could you show up in this more integrated way across contexts? And what would the outcomes look like then? So you're kind of really nicely foreshadowing that we're starting to actually question the situational leadership concept and seeing, can a leader consistently show up across contexts with some of these fundamental integrated capacities, and then of course adjust a bit depending on what the situation demands. So keep an eye on this. This is going to be our third or fourth paper.
Thank you. We've got a couple of other hands, and I would offer also that when we look at a leader that is switching contexts around what they stand for and believe in, or declaring for a vision or a purpose, that that's more consistent in the leadership circle model, and in who I am becoming, and what is authoring through me versus being authored by the situation. And I think that distinction also really helps in the move that's more integrated and more self-authored, and even bigger purpose authored, to stand for those things that are hard even in the current context that I'm in. Anita, let's go to you.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to offer the question. I think I'm still struck by, it doesn't surprise me that the relational components for particularly women leaders are that women score highly in this dimension. In coaching individuals, I find that the more directive side, on that autonomous, the directive, the decisive, doesn't always get recognized by women. And I'm just surprised about these results. So I'd be happy I'd love to hear your comments on this.
I'll kick us off, Anita, and this is actually the crux of what ignited our curiosity, because in our own experiences as leaders, it was very clear that not just building communities or being empowering, were we getting the results. It was also combining that with directiveness and harnessing our own power and making decisions, as an example, or leading through change. This was actually what spurred really that thinking or challenging that status quo or paradigm that women or traditionally feminine values were undervalued at some point. And as leaders and as women, we needed to be able to adapt to the norm that was expected. But at the same time, we knew when we go deep down that those actually existed in us. It was blocked at some point or normalized through our own culture or expectations. But we needed to do that. I have been placed in situations as a leader where I needed to be able to get out of that and break away from that, because that is what was being called for, and to be able to really drive for the outcomes that were needed.
And if you think about it, I'll just add something. If you think about women progressing to the highest ranks, at least in the last 20 years, this is changing. There is because the world companies and the cultures we create in companies have overemphasized the directive, the decision maker. Women, when they get to the C-suite or the board and higher levels, they adopt those behaviors only. And then you lose the diversity, right? Because you're just adopting to the expectations. So in Unlocking Eve, we are looking through this work is to change the paradigm, what is valued, what is rewarded, and what is then expected. And what is expected is that you bring both to the table, but you don't bring directive in like a wounded directive, right? Because there is also, you bring directive with you bring directive with an amount of reflective you integrate. You bring reflective with a bit of directive, so you're not in reflection mode for 6 months and nothing's moving. So when you look at the definition, I encourage you to go to the white paper and look at the definition of these. You'll see they're redefined. In terms of they're redefined, you will see the integrated language or the integrated behaviors in those kind of left on the right. So we won't go through them in detail because you can read them yourself, but that's the unlock we're trying to create for these leaders as well.
Thank you. Isha.
Hi, sorry I'm off camera because I'm walking to work. Thank you for doing this important work. So my question is, women or the feminine has been suppressed for a really long time. And when we suppress it in the society, we also suppress it inside us. And that's what sort of I noticed for myself in my journey is to survive in the corporate world. I suppressed my feminine so much that my drive became super high in my leadership circle at some point. And the relational aspects came down. And way to integrate, to come back to the integrative, I tried to think my way into it or act my way into it. And none of that was really working until I worked with different modalities of coaching like somatic healing, and had to really move my way through it, move my body through it. And for me, I think the question is, if we do want this to happen, if we do want the integrative, us to integrate both of these amazing energies that we have, the feminine and the masculine in a whole way, then we also maybe perhaps need to relook at the expectations of the type of coaching that is required for that. And what does that mean to have that interdisciplinary or integrated coaching approach to actually support leaders through the big transition because what has been suppressed through generations cannot just come out in a coaching engagement. It needs a journey for a
Yeah.
person to go on.
Yes, we can't take others where we ourselves haven't done our work and aren't willing to go. And then the change of approach is what Eva and Kay are so adamant about all the way around. Kay, how many more can we take? We've got 3 more up.
I think this is a great conversation, Cindy. So let's continue because I think we had a breakout session planned at the end, but this is actually helping us land the conversations as well. So I think we can continue.
Perfect. Allison.
Hi, thanks for this. I woke up this morning kind of jazzed for this, and I wasn't actually sure why, but mainly because I'm starting my own coaching business and just coming out of corporate America for last 6 months and still trying to figure out how to niche down. And this conversation is super helpful in that. So I have I just have maybe one, but if you can allow me to, that'd be great. I grew up in the world of situational leadership. I still love it and practice it today. What I loved about it was really taking the responsibility of the leader to match the situation, the person, the issue in front of them, and the leader adjusting to what people need from them. And then transformational leadership was also something I really got into because it's really about the way it was positioned in organizations. It was about changing organizations, right? I feel bad for authentic leadership. I feel like it got lost in there and people didn't quite know what to do with it. And now people apparently are, making TikToks about rejecting the word. And so whatever. What I love about integrated leadership is it feels like, whether it's coming from sort of a feminine or non-feminine approach, it feels like leader take the responsibility to integrate yourself, the social, the contextual stuff that's going on in front of you, and respond. But I think what's beautiful about it is it's starting with this notion of like starting with you as a human first. Like where are you? Where's your head? What do you know? What are your capabilities? And then taking all of that in and to face it out forward. Am I missing the point there? Or have I just sort of like summarized it and it's like I missed the whole point? Like, am I missing that? I just would love some clarity around that point.
No, I mean, you're not missing anything. It's your experience of it. And yeah, so integration, just really quickly, we have, again, it's in the paper, and we're talking about integration at 3 levels. So the power within, which is what you're explaining, the relational and there it is. Thank you. Okay. The power within. So it's like you do have these 2 human capacities. It's a awareness process in terms of unlocking them, and then unlocking the healthy versions of them as well. And then you go through a process with that. Then we have the power of 2 between. So how do you integrate between 2 leaders, between leaders and communities? And then how do you then really put that in service in power of 2 and integration beyond, meaning leading ecosystems? So there are powers of 2 and integration across these 3 levels. At this webinar, we're just talking about the intra, which is exactly what you explained, and the next 2 webinars will touch on the inter and then the beyond. But thank you for letting us kind of foreshadow that as well.
Sorry about that. Well, it tells you that your presentation up to this point actually got somebody who didn't do the homework and who hadn't read the white papers to a really good place.
It's great. It's great. And it's
the only other quick question I have, and I see I've got people behind, the notion of integrated leadership, is that situational is out there, authentic leadership is out there. I hadn't heard of that frame until this session. Is that something that we are, through the work, going to be starting to drive change around? Like, what's the sort of context of integrated leadership, and not where did it come from, but is that something that's sort of coined out there and are leaders starting to get awareness of it? Organizations even starting to get awareness of it? Just curious.
Yeah, maybe you can take this one.
Yeah, that's the goal, Allison, of Unlocking Eve. That we actually have, if I bring you back to our purpose of bringing integrated leadership in all and unlocking that, we have 3 ways on how we're going to be doing this. The work with Leadership Circle has been building the case for integrated leadership. A lot of the research that we have been doing, Adam Kitt is on the line here, who's been a wonderful partner here as our researcher in building the fact base that proves that integrated leadership is what is needed in not just now, but in the next decade for our situation at the moment. But at the same time, we do have engagement and amplification that is needed, and that is why we have a webinar today. We also have been in global forums over the last 3 years since we launched. At the World Economic Forum and at the UNGA last year, to be able to spread the word, Allison, and to highlight the importance and criticality of changing the paradigm of our understanding of leadership effectiveness. And the last one, we do have tools and programming to offer. And we have piloted over 8 countries already. And this is an exciting time for us as we now are ready to bring those tools and programming. We also have a diagnostic that we're going through for integration quotient is what we're measuring and how we measure integration.
Thank you so much.
Karen.
Okay, so much has happened since I originally put my hand up that I probably have 3 more questions. But earlier when we were talking about, women having to be both directive and compassionate or having the relational side, what I find in my coaching practice is that oftentimes they just need permission, that it's there. And it's actually not as hard to pull out. They're most of the time I find they're worried about damaging the relationship. But when you start to look at that balance and the how-to, I find it that women are quite successful. And I've even had success with some of the with the leadership circle with going the other way, directive to creative. But it's a little usually harder to go in that direction. Yeah, that's my observation. And then, yeah, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit, but I love the intra, inter, and then extra, because I think you do have to do the work inside, and I agree that there's a piece around values. And I guess the other thing I'm wondering about is whether we always needed integrated leadership, but that it's just been an evolution. But had we understood it years ago, would we be in a different place today? Both from a political, from a economic, all of those things, because we are in a pretty sorry state, I think, across the world right now. But thank you. That's it.
I think, Karen, I agree with that. And this is why the work is so critical and that there is urgency in us and the work that we're doing, because we believe that as a lot of people and leaders get to have awareness of this capacity, innate capacities within us, it's not easy because you do have to do the work. But one of the things that we've uncovered with this power of 2, this power between, that unlock or that raising of awareness and understanding of those capacities actually are amplified and are able to be, you can develop them and nurture them much faster with your power of two. And with Ava and I as a co-leader for Unlocking Eve, this is what we have seen in our own relationship and partnership. And sometimes being a coach to one another, but actually more than that, but really amplifying and extending our ranges together, and understanding our maybe notion of leadership as a single individual, that we can actually accomplish so much more when you're together. And Leadership Circle also have two co-founders in a way. So there's a lot of this power of two that we are looking at also and doing research on. That yes, being a leader, a single leader is hard enough. But actually with someone as a coach or as a partner, as a co-CEO, as a co-leader, this actually accelerates the progression of these capacities.
And maybe just to add to that, so power of two is pretty fundamental in our way of operating and in our cultivation approach, that we find accelerates the integration within. Because like you said, somebody said that you're not just going to wake up one day and, you know, try to force yourself, think yourself into the relational or think yourself into the more autonomous. But if you have another, it's so amazing what happens when you observe someone else do it and you say, oh, wow, okay, that's how it looks like. I could practice that now too. And we have this coaching guide, and we're just finishing it up. We're happy to share it with this community around power of two questions. How do you, powerful questions that you can ask the other for them to tune up their instrument and self-awareness prior to situations. And it's amazing. It doesn't take a PhD or a scientific diagnostic to do. It's because it's innate. If it's like a chiropractor, if you press the right node, kind of just pops. So the power two is a real kind of powerful but effective and tool to unlock or ignite this other side within individuals, maybe even without any very sophisticated tools. So we're very excited that we're getting this resonance around the power of two, and this needing. Had this been unlocked years ago, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation. Like I'm very buoyed by that energy and comment. We're going to work really quick to get this guide out there.
Simca.
Thank you. I'm super excited about everything that you're putting out, and I'm curious about the relationship, both the bridge between Leadership Circle and its sort of tools and model, sort of taking creative, reactive, and task and relationship, and also the unitive concept of leadership. And then, so what's the bridge and the differences between how you're seeing the use of these two models and how we bring them forward? Because I love the fact that this was created by healthcare leaders for healthcare leaders. I come out of healthcare. It's beautiful what you're doing. And I'm sitting with my questions about, as a Leadership Circle practitioner, also the bridges and the distinctions.
Yeah, I could start, Kay, maybe you can continue, and then Adam, if you had anything to chime in, because we share research, Adam as a researcher. Look, this is still evolving, right? I think we all build on things. I think what Leadership Circle does really well is they have the data around the fact that I'm also certified in Leadership Circle, by the way. So I've debriefed over 150 people with the tool since 2016. So I think what the circle does really well is it's competency based, right? It kind of gives you the competencies and what is it, capacity, the competency, and then
Attendance.
And the tendency, yes, the competency and the tendency. This is your competency that you want to develop, and this is your tendency. And it gives us a lot of confidence that we're onto something, because as Cindy presented, leaders that have high in both are 3 standard deviations more effective than leaders that have low on both. So anybody that's a scientist in the room, 3 standard deviations is a completely different animal. Like if I got a 3 standard deviation difference in a clinical trial, I'd be like, whoa, I've got a curative medicine. And so we know that the high works, right? And maybe if you go back to the infinity model up there, Yep, up. I think the unique, we want to bring something that's different, right? That is going to increase the tools that leaders have to do this work. So what we're looking at in the diagnostic that we're developing. So we'll also have a diagnostic to cultivate the capacity. So we're not just looking at the capability, the capability and the reactive tendency. It's uniquely developmental. So focus is on unlocking a leader's potential, emphasizing what they can develop, not just what they currently demonstrate. So the results you're going to get are not going to say like currently you demonstrate this creative, this reactive, but it's going to measure your capacity. It's much harder to measure, but we're working on it. It's going to measure your current capacity and then a developmental path for how can you realize that capacity since you already have both. And because again, we believe that leadership is a dynamic, ever-evolving process, and it's a capacity framework, not so much a competency framework that will then complement whatever tools are out there. So Kay, I don't know if you had anything else, and then maybe Adam, your point of view as well.
Go ahead, Adam.
I think you described that quite beautifully. So I won't go too deep onto that, but they're both incredibly versatile tools that take slightly different measures and slightly different things. The LCP is the competency-based measure, so it's really about the transition between the reactive to the creative, where integration is more about like kind of integrating various aspects into leadership. More about the capacities of the leader. I do want to touch on two other things just because I find it really interesting. I think the first comment was by Alison around like, what does this mean for coaching? I'm not sure, I'm not a coach myself, but I did have a really interesting conversation with a healthcare leader not too long ago who said that, who commented that this kind of stuff is embedded into the way that we get taught as leaders in medical school. And she said, as throughout my medical training, I always got taught that I should be the person with all the answers. You know, I should have that knowledge and people should come to me for answers, this very kind of directive mindset. And she said it wasn't until she left medical school and started looking for answers in the community where she realized how much she had to put that mindset aside, tap into that relational, to stop speaking to people one-on-one, you know, really kind of understanding and empathetic approach where she got the answers that she was looking for that made her treatments even better. So it's this mindset around directive and relational is really systemic in our organizations and the way that leaders get trained. I think as well, just comment, Karen, is like, would we have been better having an integrated model like 100 years ago? I think is a really interesting question. And the answer is maybe, maybe not. It seemed like the great man theory and situational leadership, transformational leadership served us to some point, especially going through the Industrial Revolution where we needed like strict top-down structures. But what we do find right now is that organizations that have that approach are suffering, especially in healthcare. And there's this massive call for leaders to be able to listen to their patients, to work through treatment plans with them, as well, moving from this idea that, you know, doctors, for example, should have all the answers to now people like doing their own research, they're kind of coming in with their own ideas, having that more, and starting to re-establish that trust that was lost during the pandemic. Seems to be that the organizations that are doing it now are beginning to thrive. So we're moving out of that, which I think puts a really good kind of place for integrated leadership. Like, why do we need it now, especially dealing with the complexity of the world today? But one approach just isn't good enough, or even a transformation approach has its failings.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Ed.
Thank you. Let's go to Colonel John.
Hi, hi everyone. Thank you. I love the infinity. I love the integrated leadership model. I love the leadership circle. In the Marine Corps, we believe that we invented the word leadership. They just do. That's one of the reasons I took so well to the leadership circle, because the competencies match up beautifully with what the Marine Corps believes in. Having said that, I'm curious. In your model, it talks about individualistic directive, which I'm very familiar with directive, because most people believe the Marine Corps is very directive, and the reality is it's not. The Marine Corps is very soft. It's very service oriented. It's very not individualistic. The leader's nothing without the team. Nothing without the team. You've got to serve the team. So I'm and I was put on notice when I was a young major because on Paris Island, which at the time was literally called the last bastion of manhood, believe it or not, I said the best leaders on the island are all women. Oh my God, you could have heard a pin drop. But I was being honest. I was not being facetious. So in the model, where is the room for team? Where is the room for service? Where is that room for the opposites? I I guess that's what I'm looking for. I love the model, but I almost is it buried with something else? And again, I didn't do the reading, but I will absolutely find that white paper and read it. I'm sorry, that's it. It's the service, it's the giving, it's they have before I have. I give before I get. Leader is not, hey, I'm the leader. It's not a noun, it's not a title, it's a verb, it's action.
Yes.
That's what it is. I learned that growing up as a Marine, and I was an infantry officer. So we know how to be directive when you must be directive. And those times are really actually fairly rare when you must be directive. So I'll
Yeah,
stop
and
there. Service.
John,
Thank you.
just the 30-second version of it, because we're going in. We'd love to talk to you, by the way. I think we'd love that perspective. So I've just tagged to follow up with you. But the 20-second version of it, I think of a yin and a yang. There's a black and the white, and there is a black dot in the white and a white dot in the black. If you read the definition of individualistic, you'll see the white dot, which is the communal. If you read the definition of reflective, you'll see a little bit of the black dot, which is the directive. But it's in service of the others. So more to come on a follow-up discussion. Thank you for that comment.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you, John, so much. And you know that together as we work, we're looking at just different angles and capacities and systemic change. And the leadership circle profile, the universal model, is an integrated model, bringing integration in of, and eventually of power with, and then in service to. And in this model, we're looking at the in service to the greater society, so that society gets the leaders they deserve. And we will have a couple more webinars that play this through. That you're spot on. And we are out of time. We knew it was going to go so fast. Thanks, everybody.